Hello and welcome to Mom's Way to Wellness. I am your host, Ida Maravillas. Today, we are talking about identity and rest with author Rachel Fahrenbach. Rachel is the author of the Rest and Reflect Journal. She shares a lot about the intersections of identity and rest and what that has looked like for her family after she experienced a season of burnout. Both she and her husband decided to implement a weekly Sabbath into their routine. She shares a lot of helpful tips about what this can look like in our families. So let's get into today's episode. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation and joining the Mom's Way to Wellness community.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to talk to you. I know we have known each other for quite some time. And so to be able to see even your journey over the last few years and even the start of this podcast has been really, it's just fun to see that it's come to fruition and that you're serving moms in this way. So I'm like overjoyed to get to be on this podcast today.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have been on a writing journey together, and I've been excited to root you on in terms of your published work. I'm not quite there yet, but on my way. And
Sure.
yes, and I think we have this shared message for
Hmm.
moms. I think there's a lot of overlap, and so I just was hoping that we could have a conversation today to share about how you really transitioned into the Sabbath that you and your family practice. So if you could, share a little bit with the audience about what was going on in your life that turned and pivoted your family to start practicing your Sabbath rest days.
Yeah, so you're making me think hard because this was about 7 years ago. Um, Actually, back in January, that marked the seventh, I guess, seventh year that we'd been doing it. Um, but that would mean I think back in like 2018. Yeah, so it had been the fall of 2018. By that point, I was experiencing some major burnout. I had gotten to the point where I was, just snapping at people really easily, my family, losing my temper pretty quickly, which I'll be honest, my temper is kinda something I've always worked on, but it was like there was no filtering. It was just coming so easily. Um, and I also was beginning to become really bitter about my life, like really resentful and just like feeling like I like, it was happening to me, and I didn't really have a whole lot of say in it, and I just felt like I was being swept along, and, um, I just remember just being overwhelmed, and I was doing all the right things. We are in church, we are in ministry, I was homeschooling. At this point, I had 3 kids. We had just adopted our youngest, a year 2 years before that, and so it was like a slow gradual getting to this point where things were just one right after the other. We had some friendships that kind of deteriorated unexpectedly, some hardships with uh, within, just like financial hardship. My husband lost his job at one point due to layoffs and all of that. So it just was life built upon just hurts and overworking, being just stretched too thin, and I got to this point and I was, like, already starting to go, "I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't keep this up." Like, just feel I just feel like I'm just living this life that I never imagined it would be like this, and, um, I was I yeah, and we started going over the 10 commandments at our church. It was a sermon series, and in our small group, we were going a little bit deeper into each one, and I remember the week we were talking about the Sabbath, um, and I remember sitting in the sermon thinking, every sermon I ever hear about this is, like, all the other commandments, it's all really, like, specific, like, "Oh, we still do this to this day," right? Like, "We're still not gonna lie. We're still not gonna commit adultery." But whenever we talk about the Sabbath, it's always like, it's a really nice thing to do, but don't worry about it. We're not under it anymore, so yada yada yada. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like it got pretty like significant, you know, time in the scriptures, why are we not like digging into this? Like, what actually does it mean to be a Sabbath? What does it mean to to uh, to rest? Like, what did this look like? Like, what did the Israelites? So I got really curious, just curious about everything. And we were sitting in our small group, and we're discussing what does rest look like, and everything that everybody talked about. And no judgment on this, but it just all felt really superficial to me in the moment. Like, it was like, "Oh, rest to me is sitting in front of the TV," and I was like, "Watching the football game with my family," and I'm like, "That doesn't sound restful to me. That sounds very superficial and shallow." And it in the moment, I was being judgmental. I understand now a little bit better, and I don't judge it the same way anymore. But in the moment, it just felt like, this can't be it. Like, when God was writing in the scriptures, "Remember my Sabbath," I can't imagine him being like, "Yeah, just sit in front of the TV and watch football on Sunday. That's rest." I'm like, there's gotta be more to it. And also, I know we're not under it anymore, but, because I truly 100% believe that Christ, his work on the cross and resurrection is the finishing work. Like, we can bring nothing to the table, right? So,
Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't wanna be legalistic about it, but I'm like, there just seems to be something deeper here that maybe we're missing. Maybe there's wisdom here that we're just, in all of our cultural context, we've lost sight of. And so I just got really curious, started researching it all, recognizing that like, even little things like the fact that a Sabbath for the Israelites started, because they viewed a day starting in the evening and going from evening to evening. Even that little piece just suddenly started reframing how I saw what God was asking us to do in the scriptures. And then also recognizing that Sabbath shows up before God covenants with the Israelites and makes it part of their covenant. So I just, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I think there's wisdom here. I think that it's more than just the rules of don't do these things. I think it might be a little bit more than just sitting and watching football on Sunday, but maybe it's not necessarily has to be all spiritual the whole time. And so I'm like, I think I want to start practicing this. I brought it to my husband, and my husband's like, "You want to do what now?" And I'm like,
Honey,
"Well,
what?
I
Want
think
to
I
slow
would."
down?
You want to do what? He's like, "I don't know how this is gonna work." I'm like, "I don't either." He's like, "I just like, we have these days off, and we're really like, we do these things, and we go grocery shopping on these days." And he's like, "I don't know how we're gonna fit this all in." I'm like, "I don't either." I said, "But I just feel like maybe there's something here." And he's like, "Okay, I'm willing to explore it." And I'm like, "I think we need to do a 24-hour Sabbath." And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Are you sure we can't just like take a couple?" I'm like, "I don't know, honey. I'm just feeling like maybe there's." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "Let's do it. Let's try it." I'm like, "Okay." And so in that moment, I'm like, "All right." I think I tend to like frameworks and structure and symbolism. So I was like, all right, I really love how um, traditionally uh, in Israel, they start the Sabbath with a family meal, and they welcome in the Sabbath, and they light candles, and they like distinguish it as a different time that they're entering into. And I'm like, I really like that idea. I think it would help us. I think it would help our kids just to have this time frame of like, oh, this is different. This time is different. So we
So
just started doing. Sorry.
I'm so sorry, but but you're saying some things that are so important. Like, first of all, you notice the signs of burnout like building up over an
Hmm.
extended period of time, which happens, right? It happens when we keep on going, we keep on moving,
Hmm.
and we don't tune in to the clues until they're really uh pronounced. I can't think of the right word right now, but noticeable.
Yeah, where they're impacting other parts of your life,
Yes.
and and in not in negative ways. In
Yes,
negative
and
ways,
sometimes
yes.
even impacting the people around us, right? And sometimes the closest people to us who are our safest people are the people who see the truest parts of ourselves.
Mhm.
So they kind of see that. I have to admit my family has seen that on my end as well.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how you became so curious about this
Mhm,
particular part of how God wants relationship, right? What how he ordained it, how he
mhm,
practiced it himself. And so I didn't know about this. Well, I've learned recently about how it started in the evening to the next day just because of the Bible plan that I'm reading through. But I didn't know too much about like lighting candles and welcoming it and being so intentional in the way that it is being practiced. So
mhm.
that's something that you wanted to then integrate into the way that you were practicing it.
Yes, yes. I I figured if we're gonna do it, we might as well do it, like, significantly, right? I do wanna circle back to it the question of or not necessarily the question, but the observation you made that I recognize the signs of burnout. I don't know that I recognized them as much as I just knew in the moment, like, and I wanna make this distinction because I think sometimes when we're in that place, we don't realize we're burnt out, we just are like, "This can't be it." Like, I don't really and I'm not enjoying my life. I'm not this doesn't feel right. Something feels off. And I wanna just mention that because I think for some of your listeners, if they're feeling that today, like, it just things just there's a tension there, things feel off, that's the sign. I don't think that our when you're in that state of burnout and I just don't think our culture encourages this, but it's something I've learned to do since practicing Sabbath, is having times of reflection built into your everyday systems. We speed from one thing to the next, and we don't always um, think about or reflect on or call to remembrance. And so sometimes we just keep going forward and keep pushing, and we just keep doing the same things that aren't working because we're not taking enough time to ask ourselves what's working, what's not working, why isn't it not working, what am I feeling, what is that in alignment. So this this sense of noticing the signs, I didn't really notice them as much as just I knew something was wrong, and I knew that I didn't like how I felt, I didn't like how I was responding to my family members, and I think that the curiosity I'm just wired that way naturally, like, I get really curious about things all the time. I think that's just a cultivation of, 1, my upbringing, but also my personality, but I did get curious about it, and I wanted it to be different, and I think I needed it to be different because I needed something to be different, because I was just so in a state of burnout, in a state of I knew something had to change, and so this felt like if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna make a 20 I knew it had to be not all or nothing, but just it needed to be significant, and I was like, "Well, the Lord outlines it as 24 hours in the or a full day, which actually is more like 26 hours, but that's just being technical, right? So, but I knew it needed to be a substantial part of the week. And I knew I personally, and I knew my kids needed it too, just a visual cue, just something to say, this time is going to be different. And in a way, it holds you accountable so you're not just sliding from busy, busy, busy into now we're not doing anything, but it's a transition piece. Just like our kids need transition warnings, right? Before they go from one thing to the next.
Yes,
I
it helps so
mean,
much.
it does. It does. So like our nervous system needs that too. And our I think we as people, one of the things we forget is that we are embodied souls. And our soul needs that time to say, oh, we are not stewarding right now. We're not working. We're resting. And so that's why we implemented that family rhythm. And I didn't realize how like wonderful and life-giving and beautiful and like just a thing that we started to look forward to it would become, but that's what it did. It became this piece of our week where we knew we would be together and we'd be resting together. And as we started practicing that, my whole perspective on rest even began to change.
Okay, so you said some important things. It's not that you were really very highly aware that it was burnout, but you knew that things just felt off and you weren't coming to your roles in a fulfilled way, right? So you were
Mhm.
noticing that you were feeling off and just not as kind as your beautiful self it typically is. And so from a practical sense, what did it look like or what does it look like to implement a Sabbath practice within your family unit? And then I'm curious about how your perspective on rest has shifted.
Yes. So I we started with the structure. And I think this is true for anything, right? Like, you start with a framework. You start with, like, when you start building a house, you put the walls up first, and then you put the I'm gonna show my so little knowledge of construction here, but you put on the drywall, and then you paint, and then you decorate, right? And I think for us, that's what happened. We're like, "Okay, our structure is it's gonna be," and we chose to start with, and we've done it different ways throughout the last 7 years, but, when we first started, we decided what worked best for our family was to do from noon on Saturday to noon on Sunday, and that's what we started with. We eventually shifted into, evening on Saturday to evening on Sunday, but we are currently doing evening on Friday to evening on Saturday. So over the years, we've played with different timing based off of the season of our lives. And I want to emphasize that where I'm coming from as a Christian practicing the practice of Sabbath, honoring God's original design for work and rest, that is different from, even though we're borrowing some of the beautiful traditions, and I don't want to say like we're not taking it fully and and uh participating the same way in Sabbath as the Israelites did, because that's part of their culture, right? So there is a sense of like there is a cultural aspect of belonging, but as since our faith has roots in the Jewish history and customs and traditions, even our communion has roots in Passover, which has a component of Sabbath in it. So there is this richness to our faith that has roots that when we understand them, then when we practice these things, it becomes fuller. But we are practicing from a Christian perspective, and we are not practicing from a legalistic standpoint. I don't think practicing Sabbath is going to save you or anything like that. Um, I don't think it matters what day you practice it, just that you practice some form of rest every 7 days. I recommend 24 hours because I think when you put that big of a chunk, it forces you to realign the rest of your week. And so, I'm just gonna put a pin in that and come back to that.
Yes.
But so what our structure began to look like, um, the Bible isn't really very prescriptive about what Sabbath is supposed to look like. It has only a couple of things about what not to do with the Sabbath. Um, the rest that they had, like the rest of the restrictions, were added later by people who were just trying not to break those rules.
Okay.
But they all amount to the same thing. Don't do anything that brings you income, right? Don't do anything that's going to require somebody else to do work on your behalf. So don't don't do like give your servants the day off too, right? Like you do not need people doing things for you. Um, don't do things that I think it's funny because the one that there's a don't like light a fire, and I think that was God protecting the moms. Because who's the one that's tending the hearth in hearth, I think that's how you say it,
Yeah.
in these ancient cultures? It was the mom. She's taking care of that. She's making the meals, right? And I think that was God's way of protecting the moms in that time period of, don't your this typical housework you have, put it aside. You don't have to do that. Prepare ahead of time and just take the day off. And so I started realizing that work work meant a lot more than just your 9 to 5. Because also as a stay-at-home mom, I was like, what counts as work? Like, I still have to change diapers. So there was even a shift in what was work and what was rest. And so we
And
started our
I need to interject here
oh,
that
I'm sorry. Feel free. I will just keep going. So just interrupt anytime you
I
want to.
appreciate it, but I do need to take a side note here because not everyone might realize that you are a homeschooling mom
Oh,
as
yes.
well, and then you also work in a business, so you
Yes.
are a working mom. I have this saying for stay-at-home moms who I work with. I say, "You show me any mom, and I will show you a working mom."
Mhm.
Because whether or not you get paid for your work or not,
Yep.
it's work. It
Yes.
is parenting, and I
Mhm.
think about all the roles that we hold, and if we were to contract out for some of those roles,
Right.
I
Yeah. Yeah,
I joke
exactly.
sometimes with my teen, or I say this to other moms, like, there's value in what you do. Like, really, if you
Mhm.
could pay people out for what you do, if you could contract it out, you would contract an Uber driver, a cook,
Mhm.
Instacart shopper,
Yes. Yes.
um, a laundry service, a a house manager, like, there's so many
So
different
many.
so
Mhm.
many. So I love that you touched on that and seeing that some of this is also intentional in terms of a gift for a mom
Yes.
to be able to set aside that time and not necessarily have to show up, not to show up
Yes.
to those types of daily responsibilities. At least that's
Yes.
some of what you received from when you were reading some of the ways, and you're being
Yes.
respectful to that. Okay, we don't have to practice it in the sense that they did in their culture, but there's still a way that we could integrate the practice of how God really designed us to need that rest.
So we one of the ways that we did that is in our um in the start of our Sabbath, we light candles and I pray the same prayer every single week. And part of that prayer is we recite John chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning of all things. All things were made through him, and without him, nothing that was made has been made, right? In him we have life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. So we recite that segment of scripture each week to remind ourselves that one, our life comes from God. He sustains us. We are his created beings. And then two, to remind us that Christ has already come as a light in this world, and we are able to rest because of him. And then after that passage is read, I do the prayer, and that prayer includes a statement of, help us to remember that we can rest in your provision. Because, and so in those little ways, I've tried to say, this Sabbath thing was originally a foreshadowing of what the rest was that Jesus was going to give. But it's also structure that we should live in, and it's wisdom for us. And to go back to the whole work thing as a mom, it's really hard, right? It's hard to distinguish what does it what I can never truly, and this is always the, objection I hear from moms when they're like, "Oh, well, that would be nice to rest, but I can never rest, like, the world would fall apart if I rested." 1, it shouldn't be that way. The world should not fall apart if you take a moment to rest. But also, I think we mistake caring for our children's needs as being work. I think the church has made us believe this, and I think the world has made us believe this, that our children's well-being is our work, and it's not. When we take care of our children, we image God's provision for us. When we take care of their, diapers, when we make them their meals, when we provide food for them, when we make sure that they are not harming themselves, we are essentially imaging what God does for us all the time when we're resting or when we're working. but also we have to take care of our personal needs all the time. Like, we have to go to the bathroom, we
Yes.
have to eat, we have to take a shower, and that doesn't stop just because you Sabbath. And so I think that it's important for us as moms to take out the pieces where our kids are just depending on us to take care of their personal needs versus working, which is cultivating, multiplying, bringing forth fruit from something. And that can look different in every area of your life. For me, as a homeschool mom, I'm cultivating education in my children's life and I'm bringing forth that fruit. In my home management, I am cultivating a habitat that is fruitful in that it provides for my family's physical and emotional needs, right? When I steward my writing, when I take care of another business that I own, those are income generators. That is stewardship, that is work. So, but there's also this component of where, and this is where I relearned what rest was. For me, writing can be an income generator, but it can also just be a life-giving activity. And so I started going and writing on our Sabbath practices, on our Sabbath days. Um, and I still do. I still take a chunk of time and I go write. And I don't write for the purpose of creating income. I write just for the purpose of playing. And so when we started identifying, okay, what counts as work? What are we not going to do on these days? Um, it wasn't out of a needing to be legalistic about it, but just of a like putting some guardrails on it. Like, okay, we're not going to wash dishes on this day because that's a job I typically have as part of cultivating my home, right? Cleaning.
Yes.
My husband is not going to do any kind of work for work, but house projects where he lights up because he likes to work with wood and do projects, we didn't say no to that, right?
Mhm.
So it kind of, we had to decide what areas of stewardship do we have personally as individuals and then also as a couple. And we just kind of use that as a bar. Is this an income generating thing? Is this something that we have to like produce when we give into it, we produce something out of it? Or is this something that just is playful and fun and enjoyment? And that's when I started realizing that that guy wasn't that far off with his whole statement about sitting around watching football. Because for him, it was enjoyment, it was playful, it was something he shared with his kids. And I think that the Lord, when I started looking at what he had laid out in scripture, it's like the Sabbaths are always associated with feasting. The Sabbath is about community. The Sabbath is about praising God. It's like God's like, all right, here we go. Here's this abundance. I want you to enjoy it. Like, I don't want you to spend all your time cultivating it. I want you to take a moment and enjoy it with me. And so I think God is honored when we rest, when in ways that are joyful, playful, and focused on community and focused on feasting and focused on just enjoying the beauty of his creation and enjoying the life that you've been given to steward. And so that when I started like practicing this every week, I started realizing through the this is work, this is how we rest, identifying those two different areas, it just gave me a new appreciation for what God is actually inviting us into.
That sounds so important, especially especially when you happen to spend so much time with your kids throughout the week and having to shift the way that you're stewarding that time with them, right? And
Mhm.
then like really looking at, well, what do I do at home? It's a form of work, but it's not income producing type of work.
Mhm.
So it's stewardship more so
Mhm.
than it is. It sounds like that shift in perspective as
Yeah.
well.
Well, also recognizing that I think that work is stewardship. I think stewardship is work. And I think that what Sabbath teaches us the most is dependency on the Lord to sustain us. And so when we're worried about, oh, are the financials going to get, how am I built? How am I going to pay for this grocery bill this week? That's a practice of saying, I'm not going to take up extra gigs on Saturday. I'm gonna maybe take some extra gigs during the rest of the week, but I'm gonna trust that this day that I've taken off, that I don't have to do income generating work for God to cover the bills, right? I can steward the other times of the week and I still can give this time of the week to rest. And that's a huge act of obedience and trust. Because in those moments when you're like, my husband, this has hit him the hardest out of like, I'm home all day long, right? Because I work from home, I homeschool. I have a lot more hours to like shove things in the cracks. He has a very designated, like, he goes to work, but the work that they give him doesn't stay in those hours, right? Like they give him more work to do than realistically he can get done. And his time during the day is often eaten up by meetings, eaten up by like these fires that come up that he has to put out. And so he has struggled over and over and over again. He has to surrender the fear that if he doesn't work on the weekend during this 24-hour period of time, I mean, he might work on the next day, because in our culture we have 2 days off, but we're just talking about taking 1, right?
Right.
And so he has had to work through the fear of, I'm not gonna work late on Friday night, and I'm not gonna work during the day on Saturday. I might work Saturday evening after our Sabbath had ended, or Sunday afternoon to if I need to, but I'm not gonna treat those other times as even an option because I know it's imperative to rest with my family and for me to rest as a human being. And so that's been really hard for him to, not hard, but just a challenge to learn to give that up in surrender and trust that it's all going to be okay and work out. Um, and be okay with stating that to his boss. Like, I'm not working during these times. Like, this is a boundary, and you're going to have to respect that boundary. And which, I mean, I don't think that's too, I, like, of course, me over here, I'm like, dude, he shouldn't have any claim to your weekends anyway. But, it's easier said than done when
It
you're
is.
not the one in it.
It is.
But
It is easier said than done, but it sounds like it's very intentional in terms of protecting the time. Like
yes,
being
yes,
intentional about
100%.
protecting the time, setting a boundary for what that time is going to look like and how it's going to be used.
I do want to mention because I know we're talking to moms, and I am not entirely sure what the season of life the moms are in that are listening to you. Are they pretty much all different seasons of life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the moms who are listening who have very young children and they're like, that all sounds lovely, but this is like a lot harder in practice. And 100%, I think that you start small. Start with, I do think you should just go ahead and do a 24-hour rest, but your family meal, make it really simple on yourself. Like, well, however you choose to start your Sabbath, make it simple, make it easy. Do every Sabbath starts with pizza. That's your pizza night, and you light one candle and you just pray a blessing over your time of rest. You don't have to make it super fancy. What I would suggest is that you and your spouse take some time to say, okay, during our 24-hour rest, this is an hour and a half to 2 hour window where we switch. And one of us becomes the primary response parent, is what we call it in our home, the primary response parent. And the other one is getting to do something that's just life giving to them. So we have done this where when I'm on, my husband is in the garage just piddling around, doing stuff in his workshop, whatever, whatever he does out there. And then when he's been the primary, and then we switch, and the next hour and a half, I've gone and written, in my office, or I might just go read, or sometimes I just took a bath, like just away from everybody. Um, Especially when you're young, with the littles always like needing something from you and depending on you, that's exhausting.
Yes.
And so just to know that you and your spouse can switch off to have just a designated time where you just have a refilling what it did for me, because we agreed on that pretty early, we realized that pretty early on, thankfully, and we started doing that as our practice. What I realized is that during the week when I was like, "My gosh, I have, like, no time to myself," right? I don't have time to read, I'm so exhausted, I just wanna go to bed, but then I wake up and it's all over again. I started realizing that I could look forward to Saturday. I knew there was protected time there, and it just made the other hours of stewardship seem less daunting and less like a just heavy because I knew that there was a break. It was there and it was protected. And so it gave me something to look forward to. Um, I think that that is really vitally, like, out of everybody who needs a Sabbath practice, a mom with young kids needs it. Like,
I
I just,
agree. I
I just think
agree.
she does.
Yes, and a lot of times
Yes.
when I'm talking with moms, they don't know how they would use any time that they were
Yes.
to have to themselves. And
Yes.
so I think it's important too that we have to evaluate what feels life-giving, what feels nourishing, what feels replenishing. And I'm curious about what you've learned about yourself and your
Mm,
identity since
yes.
practicing Sabbath.
Yes. Um, One thing before we go there, it's a practice and you get to do it every week. Which means that even if you don't figure it out the first week, you have the next week. And maybe it doesn't go as well that next week, that's okay. You have the next week. And maybe that next week you have like, wow, this was really great. Let's do this again. And you modify and you go and you learn as you go. And some seasons, some things are what you need. And other seasons you're like, yeah, no, I would rather be out going on a hike every week, instead of being at home and reading. You learn those things about yourself because you get to do it again. And
Yes.
it's not a one and done thing. It's not perfection. It's just a practice every week that you show up to. And I did want to mention that what helped me to think about it, and I used to have this down pat, so I'm probably going to stumble through this a little bit. But I used to say that Sabbath, you can kind of organize it by 4 or 5 R's. And now I'm gonna see if I can remember it. But it was remember, so remember your God and what he's done for you. Reflect, meaning reflect on your week and what's happened. And so we always have a reflection time during our Sabbath of like, what were your challenges? What were your joys this week? Um, so reflect, uh, relax in ways that feel good to you, like about your personality or support your personality. Um, well, let's see, I'm forgetting one of them. So I'm just going to end with this one. Rejoice during your Sabbath. Like, take this time to rejoice that God has given you another week to live and work and breathe and be with him in that. Like, he invites you into work, invites you into rest with him. And so, having said that, I think that's what I learned each week about myself as I started practicing this. The first week, I took a nap in a chair. After that, I decided, oh, I want my Sabbath to include time in this chair. And so I just started sitting in the chair. And eventually, I don't even know at what point I started doing this, but I started asking myself, what did I embrace this week? How did God embrace me? What am I looking forward to next week? And I just started doing that every week, that reflection. And then I started having these conversations with Jesus where I was like, okay, help me to see this week through your eyes. And then I started asking, help me to see me through your eyes. Like, help me to see my purpose through your eyes. Help me to understand my community and relationships through your eyes. And I just started having these weekly conversations with Jesus about my identity, my belonging, my purpose. And this just opened things up. I think understanding that I first am a daughter of God. And even more than that, I'm an image bearer of God. That's my identity. That's your identity. That's our identity as humanity. We're image bearers. And my God that I image is creative. He's faithful. He's loving. And if that's what I'm being called to, then my weeks need to reflect that. And so I started understanding, wait, how have you designed me to do this? How have you designed me to partner with you in work and partner with you in rest? How have you, created me? Like, who am I? I know I belong to you. What does that mean? And so I just started exploring these questions in prayerfully and journaling and reflecting, and soon learned that, God has created me to be somebody who is a storyteller, which I had always known, but I had kind of put aside um, in the years before I burned out. And I think that protecting the writing time was getting back to that core piece of who God had created me to be. Um, Understanding that I was a image bearer who held a lot of roles that I stewarded. So I held the role of mother. I held the role of writer. I held the role of volunteer. But at the core of it, my identity was a created being who was purposed to work with God and rest with God.
Okay.
And when I started to see myself through that lens, I started realizing that my weeks needed to reflect that. It needed to be purposeful, intentional, and done in a way that brought honor and glory to Him and not necessarily to myself. And I realized that if I was moving through my weeks, if I was moving through my weeks completely burnt out, snapping at people, bitter about what I was showing up to every day, then that was not me being in alignment. And that meant that there was something on my week that needed to be removed, some expectation, some uh, outwardly like claim on my time that I just needed to start saying no to. Um, and and that has led to getting very clear on what is our family about? What is our mission? Like what are we are not we are a family that yes, we are individuals, but we are a team on mission. That to borrow from Jefferson Bethke's Take Back Your Family book, he talks about this. My family is not my ministry. My family is my team that does ministry together, right? We are on mission for God together. So even recognizing like, okay, we all have individual talents and giftings. I have those, my husband has those, my kids have those. How can we spur those up in one another so that we can do the things that we feel God has called our family to do together? And it doesn't mean that we're all doing the same thing all the time, but we are all with that mindset together. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing I learned about myself is that I am this image bearer and I have been uniquely designed to do these things. And God didn't make a mistake with that. He did it on purpose and he called me into it.
I love I just love the way that you frame that, right? It's with so much intention and growing closer in your relationship with God, having
Yeah.
the opportunity set aside, protected time, and even to explore what it is that you enjoy, but also noticing like
Yeah.
what's not aligned for the week, what needs to be adjusted,
Yeah.
so that you could serve in the roles, so that you could steward the roles, but the
Yeah.
roles don't define you. Your
Yes.
image bearer
Yes.
is the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That is so beautiful. What would you say to a mom who is listening and feeling afraid to slow down or feeling too exhausted? I know you spoke a little bit to her,
Yeah.
but what's one, maybe just in closing, some way that you can encourage a mom?
Mm. This is hard because I know there's just so many. I know when for the mom who is afraid to stop, afraid to slow down, I think there's two folds to it. She either feels like everything's going to fall apart and she's going to have more to do in the long run, or she can't even the thought of like, what would I even do with my time? Like, if it's not to get things done, then what would I even do? Because she's been so busy taking care of everybody else, she's forgotten what it means to be herself She's lost herself in the midst of everything. And so for the first mom who is thinking, "Oh, if I put it all down, it's just gonna be more work later on." Um, I think that one of the ways that Sabbath really shifts your mindset is from remembering that you are it reminds you that you are a finite being with limitations. And because of that, you are not the big creator, you are a little creator. You are somebody who is stewarding work that God has already started. One of the beautiful things about the day being from evening to evening is that the first thing that God did when he made man was have him go to sleep. And then he woke up into a day that was of rest. And then he goes to sleep again. And then he wakes up in a day that God's already got going on. And so I think that's true for us. We wake up into work that God has already been doing. We are not creating work, we're stepping into something that he's already done for us. And so I think that for the mom who's worried everything's going to fall apart, it's going to be so much work, blah, blah, blah. One, I think you need to take a really hard look at the things that are calling your time and attention. Maybe there's stuff there that doesn't need to be there, but also, and I know that that's really hard. It is hard. Um, but our world puts a lot of expectations on us. Our church puts a lot of expectations on us that God never intended for us to have. So that would be one. Two, I would encourage you to start leaning on the people that God has placed around you. If you're married, lean on your husband, talk to him, share with things. There's things that he probably is willing to do. He just doesn't know that they need to be done because he can't read your mind. As much as we love that, guys cannot read our mind. So,
Any man is
y-
listening right now. He's saying, preach it.
yes. So, your husband probably wants to help. He just doesn't know how. And that also means you have to relinquish a little bit of control. That if you ask him to load the dishwasher, you just don't care how he loads it. Okay. It's just, I know.
Yeah.
But it is better that it's done rather than that it's done a certain way. Um, so that's one thing. Lean on your husband if you're married. If you're not married, if you're single, there are probably others in your social circle, maybe parents, maybe siblings, that you can lean into a little bit more for help. Your kids are so much more capable than I think our world wants to. Like, we forget this all the time. Your job as a mom is not to make your kids' lives frictionless. That is how they grow, is by having challenges, by doing things, by learning skills. And so by having them help with housework, having them help with the things that you need to get done, that allows them to gain skills for adulthood, but also understand that life isn't always about them, which is really necessary. Our kids need to know that. You give far more to your kids than you probably give yourself credit for. And so, what I would say to you is relinquish that guilt, that mom guilt that plagues us all. Give it to God and ask Him to show you where you need to be faithful in motherhood and what things are just expectations you placed on yourself or lies that you're believing or ways that you are fearful that if you stop doing something, whatever those lies may be, or areas that you're fearful, ask God to reveal those to you and surrender them to Him. You are carrying far more than you were designed to carry. You were designed to steward your life, but you were not designed to carry it all, and that's why the Lord says to cast your burdens on Him. That's why He talks about His yoke being easy, right? He is the sustainer. He is your provider. He is faithful. He loves you. He does not want you. There is no badge of honor in going through your life just trudging along and being exhausted and feeling like the world's falling apart around you. He came to give you life and give it to you abundantly. So that's what I would encourage that mom. For the mom who is like, I don't even know what I would do with myself if I was to rest. I feel like that would be a waste of time because I just don't even have any. Hun, give yourself the time. Even if it's just to sit there in silence, give yourself the time to rediscover what you are passionate about, rediscover hobbies, or learn a new one. Like, give yourself the time. Um, my guess is you probably maybe you did not grow up in a situation where you could just have fun hobbies or playfulness. You have that still, or maybe you did. Maybe your childhood had plenty of that, but you've just gotten away from that. Playing does not end just because you turn 21. Playing does not end because you are a mom. You get to play and delight in things. God delights in us. He is the creative God. I mean, a God who makes the platypus is not a God who doesn't like isn't playful. Like, come on. He is. He's a playful God. And I think he delights in creation. And so I think what better thing to do on a Sabbath than to pick up a creative hobby like painting or crocheting or something like that and just learn and grow and 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 just being restful does not mean doing nothing. Being restful means doing things intentionally without the expectation of some product at the end of it all.
Yes. Oh, that was so much wisdom for both moms and maybe even overlapping kinds of
Yeah.
concerns that sometimes moms carry with feeling too afraid to let go or not sure of what they would enjoy because they've lost
Yeah.
themselves in the fringes of motherhood. And so, thank you so much for
You're
sharing
welcome.
with our community today. I really appreciate you. And I'm just wondering if you could share where can listeners connect with you and learn more about the work you do? Because I know that you have several different ways that you are working to serve other moms and others in general.
So probably the first place to find me is rachelfahrenbach.com. And that's just my author page, and you'll find my books there. Um, I know we had kind of mentioned this before, but the Rest and Reflect guided journal.
And I just
This
want to
book,
hold mine up here.
yes,
I have it too. I've enjoyed it.
yes. So those conversations I was talking about, if you are like, you know what, I don't even really how have I been designed? What are my purpose? What is my purpose? What's my identity? I don't know. This is that book. This is meant to help you work through that reflection time, to journal through it. There's some really short devotions in here, but there's like one short devotion at the beginning of the week, but then just some prompts, some questions to prayerfully work through with God. Um, about your identity, purpose, and belonging. And so, if you are wondering, okay, well, what would that look like? What I want to explore those questions some more. That would be a great resource for you. If you're wanting to dive more into the conversation of Sabbath and also get kind of the structure that we use and some resources, some ideas, some schedule templates, my website simply Sabbath .com has all of that. I had a podcast. Those podcast episodes are all on that website. Podcast it ended a while ago,
It's
but all of
resting
those
right now.
it's resting, yes. Maybe one day it'll come back, but, right now it's in a resting time, and so but all the episodes are on the website. There's resources on that website. There's a liturgy that you can purchase on that website. So it's just anything if you're wanting to go deeper into that conversation of what a Sabbath could look like for a busy Christian mom, that's where you would find that. Um, if you want to connect with me on socials, I'm mainly on Instagram, and it's just my name, Rachel Fahrenbach. And then I'm also wading into the waters of Substack. So you can find me on Substack at rachel.fahrenbach.com, or not .com, but Rachel Fahrenbach. And then if you are like, you know what, I don't know what to do during my Sabbath, but I really like to read, you can pick up my novel that I wrote last year and released last year. Um, my novels, I try to explore these concepts of what does it mean to center your identity in alignment with God and align your work and life with Him. And so this book explores that question of identity.
Yes, I will put a link in the show notes to different ways that listeners can connect with you. I just want to hold up that I have a copy of your book as well. It's I really enjoyed it. And yes, I am also exploring the different things that I enjoy doing at times of rest and rediscovering that fiction is my jam for reading.
Yeah,
At
I love
least,
it.
yeah, at least at a certain part of the day. At a certain part of the
Yes.
day where that's where my mind just needs to not think about any appointments to be made or decisions to
Mm,
be made. And, nonfiction is my daytime choice.
yes, yes, yes. I
Thank you
love
so
it.
much. Thank you for being with us today, Rachel. And
You're
I look
welcome.
forward to another conversation in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast talking about this.
I'm so thankful for Rachel's interview with us today. She shared so much wisdom and insight, especially for moms who might be struggling with the idea of taking time to rest, of taking time to let go of expectations, to lean on supports. She talked about just so many good takeaways. And one of the things that I hope you take away from today's conversation is this: rest is not something we earn after we've done enough. It's something God designed us to receive. And that is so important for us to keep in mind when it comes to serving the needs of our body, serving the needs within our family, within our community, stewarding the gifts that we've been given. And so Sabbath reminds us that our worth is not measured by how much we produce, how much we manage or accomplish in a week. It invites us to pause long enough to remember who we are: people who are loved, people who are image bearers of God, and people who are sustained by God and cared for by Him. Even one small rhythm of rest can begin to share the way we move through our lives. So, before we close today, I hope this conversation reminded you that rest isn't something we have to earn, it's an invitation. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you thought of someone who can use the encouragement that you received from this episode, please share it with them. If you would like to receive the monthly newsletter and insider information about the show, you can sign up to be part of the Mom's Way to Wellness community at idamaravillas.com.